Hello there, my friend, and welcome to the Ayurveda and Psychology podcast. I am Charlotte Skogsberg, your host for this podcast. I am enchanted to meet and to take you with me on this journey into the human psyche, viewed from the holistic approach of yoga and Ayurveda, and viewed from the modern man approach of clinical psychology and psychoanalysis. So have something nice to drink next to you, maybe a cup of tea, have a seat, or go out for a nice walk in nature maybe. Enjoy. In today's episode, which is focusing on Ayurveda, I want to speak about something that is almost as essential as the digestive system for you and your health, of course, but for the Ayurvedic perspective, and that is routine. Now, there are quite a lot of studies these days, scientific studies, showing why routines are really quite essential for us as human beings. We notice actually that our capacity to learn increases when we're installing a routine in the way we do things. We notice as well that our neurological capacities increases as well when we are used to routines. We notice, of course, that especially if these routines are specifically healthy for us, that our overall health improves, of course, including our physical body, including our mental clarity, and including our emotional regulation. I often just mention when I speak about this 5 reasons to have a routine, especially having a routine in the morning, and I will explain why in the morning. And so I just wanted to mention them here before I then go into more detail of my personal routine that I have in the morning. And so the first thing is that having a routine in the morning allows you to create a set point of the day. Okay? And what I mean by that is that we can all experience that the night was bad, we might not have slept well, we might have had bad dreams, we might have this and that. We might also have had a bad night the night before, as in the evening, or even the day, okay? That leaves traces as we sleep, but also as we wake up in the morning. So what I'm saying is that it obviously happens to everyone to wake up on the wrong side, let's say. And having a morning routine allows for you to make the change necessary for you as soon as you get up, to not let that perpetuate, basically to not stay in that state, but to instead start from a blank sheet, if you will. So a morning routine is then a space that you've created for you. It's a mindful practice, and it's before all the daily doings, right? The stress and everything, whatever that comes towards you. It means then that you take action when you have this moment of peace in the morning, which will induce, let's say, taking action later on in the day as well, which means that instead of just reacting to situations, you will be able to keep that feeling of the space and then take action. So what I mean by that is you are acting instead of reacting in the morning, which means that you will also more easily do it later on in the day. The second reason is that it permits you to stay focused longer in the day. Naturally, if you take this time in the morning where there's one part of it that is just a stillness practice, like for instance meditation, and then some kind of physical activity where you are not really focusing on too many other things than what you're actually doing, you are training your mind, you're conditioning your mind for mindfulness. Mindfulness being the fact of being just present, being aware of everything that is happening in that instant without being concerned about future or past, let's say, right? It's not the actual definition depending on who you ask, but just to make that quite clear for everyone, it's a question of being present, it's a question of awareness and the capacity to be able to stay focused on that. So to orient your mind towards the present moment, let's say, as much as possible. And of course, if you can train yourself to do this every morning, naturally, you create a stronger capacity to focus and to concentrate, which will then be carried along with you into the rest of the day. The third reason for having a morning routine is that you then learn to control your stress levels. No matter what you do in the morning there, what you set up, whether it's just sitting down, whether it's breathing exercises, or whether it's a physical activity, you're actually training your nervous system, you're conditioning your nervous system so that you can actually have the control over it, which means that you have a capacity to stay regulated in your nervous system, even when there's external situations happening that would trigger the nervous system to lash out and to be stressed. The fourth reason to have a morning routine is that it improves your confidence, actually. Because you see, when you have a strong then nervous response, what happens is that it helps you to stay calm, of course. It's basically what I just explained on the third one. But it helps you to stay calm in difficult situations. And so this sounds almost silly what I'm saying, but it's so true. Of course, it sounds silly because it's so obvious, but most of the time we don't think about it. Obviously, if I can stay calm in a difficult situation, I will much faster and much more efficiently find the solution to the situation. Because actually, one of the things I love to say, which is something that my teacher said, Swamiji Abhishek, the elder of the Vedanta lineage in Rishikesh, he said, friends, stay calm. The mind that finds the solution to the problem is the same mind that found the problem itself, but it can only find the solution if it's calm and collected. And that it's exactly it. Now, what happens if you have trained yourself that well that every time that you encounter a difficult situation, you notice yourself being really calm, and you notice that you manage then therefore to find the solution to the situation much better and more efficiently? Well, what happens is that you become more confident, of course, because it becomes no longer a potential outcome, but it becomes a certain outcome since it happens over and over. And the fifth reason is that we develop healthy habits. So the more you stick to this routine, the prouder you also become of yourself, and the brighter you will look at the future. And the brighter you look at the future, the more you want to continue perpetuating these healthier habits in your life. And why would this be important, you might think? Well, for one reason, what we call the placebo effect is, at the end of the day, something that's far more complex than we used to think, right? Because a long time ago, what they called placebo effect was in scientific research, they would test new pharmaceutical pills, for instance, and in order to approve of a new drug, they needed to see that the effects of the drug was so many times more effective than the placebo. So they would use two groups, right? And they would give like a sugar pill to some, and they would give the drug to others, and then they would see the effects. And of course, in more recent times, they have understood the whole, let's say, gold mine that it actually implies, this whole idea of placebo effect. But what we could simply call it is mindset is everything. And I was listening to a scientist speaking about a research that they've done with hotel workers who were physically active all day long, obviously, because they were cleaning hotel rooms in a big hotel. And they were up and down, and it was like all day long, right? And it was hours and hours. Yet that in their minds, they actually thought when they were asked that they never got any exercise. And so what the, I think, official recommendations were back then was to get 30 minutes of physical exercise every day. And this is happening somewhere in America. So this was like the American whatever who state kind of recommending that. And what happened was that they then told these people how much time, so the 30 minutes. And then when they realized that obviously they did, I don't know, 6-7 hours maybe of moving back and forth, up and down, they would actually notice all of a sudden physical improvements in their bodies. So what this means is that even though they did the same kind of physical workout, if you will, as they were working, knowing that this was actually a workout and that it was exceeding far beyond what the country's recommendations were, all of a sudden you would see so much more impact physically on them. So it's basically that if we just keep doing something mindlessly, we'll notice less improvement even though we're doing it than when we are doing it mindfully and with the intention of getting whatever we want out of it, as in the exercise, for instance. So naturally, by having a routine in the morning that I stick to, that helps me having a better capacity to control my nervous response, which will bring more calm into my life, and that will increase my confidence because I will not be just reacting to everything. That will then, of course, make me feel physically better because I've got this routine. That will lighten as well then my mood and have a brighter look at the future. I will want to continue this because it's making me feel good, right? And so as I'm already in then this cycle of having these healthy habits that I'm aware of, I'm doing them intentionally, it naturally brings to me a wish to continue having other healthy habits and let go of other unhealthy habits, for instance. So there we go for why it's important to have a routine. Now, when it comes to the Ayurvedic principles, and when we look into the circadian cycle, so basically the hours of the day, the sunrise, sunset, and these kind of things. And from the Ayurvedic perspective, we want to work with nature, which means we want to get up when nature thinks that we should get up, let's say, when it's the best time. We want to do things and we want to exercise when that is the best time, and we want to be active and intellectual instead when that is the best time, etc. This means that one of the best things to do in the morning as you've come out of sleep is to begin first of all with elimination. Elimination means during the night, as we sleep and as the organs of the body are detoxifying themselves, as they do when we allow for the body to rest, we will notice in the morning that the ama, or the toxins, have accumulated and we need to get rid of them. Once we've gotten rid of them, then we can fill up on liquid, energy, maybe food, these kind of things, which will have us strong and awake for being fully active in the prime time of the day when the sun is high. This means that the best thing for us to do as we wake up in the morning is to have our physical activities as well. When we wake up, we usually notice the toxins that has been accumulated during the night, because most of us need to go to the bathroom relatively soon after waking up. If you have not a regular bowel movement, which is daily, at least you've noticed that you need to go and urinate when you wake up, most probably, which is normal because it's the accumulation of things that the body needs to get rid of. It is essential that you bring into your routine, if it's not already the case, to have a regular bowel movement in the first hour after waking up. That is super important. I will, in another episode, go further into detail around elimination on bowel movement and how to work with that. Because if we are someone who is easily constipated, for instance, constipation belongs to the Vata dosha and is an imbalance in the Vata dosha. And I will speak about that more specifically. So we want to eliminate as much as possible before we begin to do things in our day. We need to go to the bathroom. Then what I personally do is that I scrape my tongue. And that is also really great option for everyone. It's easy these days usually to find a tongue scraper anywhere in the world. If you don't, I mean, you can find, if you can't find it where you live, you can find it on iHerbs probably. You find it obviously on all the sites of the Amazon and whatnot. So that should absolutely not be a problem. And it is so important, you notice it very soon after you've brought that into a habit, that you begin to not only notice differences in how you feel in your mouth and your digestion as well, but also you notice that actually the coating on the tongue decreases. So that means that there's less and less toxins to eliminate. Now, we all have a coating when we wake up in the morning, okay? Because that's natural that we do have toxins that we need to eliminate that have been accumulated. However, if that coating is really quite thick, then we really need to detoxify our body, because that is not very healthy at all. And as everything else, we just need to start with a routine, be regular in our routine, and little by little, we will progressively see the changes. We scrape our tongue, and then what I personally do as well, even before I scrape the tongue actually, is that I do what is called oil pulling. So I use coconut oil, but originally in the Ayurvedic practices, it was actually used more the sesame oil. And I would say that one or the other works perfectly fine. That's not that important which one you use. For me, it's easier to use coconut oil, at least where I am, because it's easy to access and it's very cheap. I'm living obviously then in Indonesia, so there's a lot of palm trees. And what I would highly recommend though, just as with everything else, and even if you use this for other things as well then, not only to oil pull, is to get a cold pressed and organic version, okay? Oil pulling means that you take a bit, let's say like a kind of like a mouthful. You can find some information about just how much you should, maybe like a tablespoon or two or something like that. But I just take a mouthful. And then you swirl that around, swish that around in your mouth. And I do it for 20 minutes. It should be done for 20 minutes, really. But as you start out, that might just be a little bit too much of a big chunk to bite, to swallow. So if you can start small, like maybe starting with 5 minutes or 10 minutes, that's already great. So you swish it around in your mouth for the amount of time that you can, and then you spit it out. So I start with that actually, and then I scrape my tongue. After I've scraped my tongue, I then have already prepared, while I'm going around in my morning with this oil pulling, I also prepare obviously other things while I'm doing that. So I'm preparing my first big cup of warm water with lemon and a little bit of sea salt. And so as I spit out the oil and I scrape my tongue, I first of all also take a mouthful of the warm water, swish it around and spit it out to rinse out from my mouth, okay? Then it would be recommended to even brush your teeth after this. I actually sometimes do that a little bit later. Both work fine, and I think that's definitely up to each and one. For me, it feels as if the oil pulling is already eliminating quite a lot of toxins from my gum and from the teeth. So I actually wait until I have my first warm beverage usually before I brush my teeth. But that is, it depends on you. So then I have my big cup of warm water. Now, that warm water can be plain, depending on several things, depending on your constitution, depending on the time of the year and where you are in the world. Different things will work for you. So, for instance, being here in Bali, I personally have noticed that some imbalances that I can find is the heaviness in the air, for instance, since there's the atmosphere is much heavier here than, for instance, where I'm from in Scandinavia, Sweden. So the lemon and also actually the salt is really beneficial for me here in this climate. Now, when I was back in Sweden, for instance, not that long ago, earlier last year, and it was already quite a vata environment, so light and moving and dry, but also it was spring, and not a rainy spring like it can be, of course, but a very vata kind. So it was a very, very dry climate, and it was quite cold, and it was quite windy. And so my vata, which is one of my dominant doshas, was really active, which then had me noticing that the lemon, for instance, was a little bit aggravating for my vata. And so then I would skip the lemon. So there's different things you can do, right? It's the same for kapha people, for instance. For kapha people, having that warm water with the lemon is great, but then you would most probably not put the salt in, okay? Because so the salt binds water and helps to bind the water in the cells in your body. And that is really good for instance, vata. It can be also quite good for pitta, depending on, because pittas sweat a lot, so they can also lose a lot. But for a kapha person, that's absolutely not necessary, since kapha accumulates and has already a lot of water inside. Okay? For a kapha person, for instance, the idea of adding some ginger to this warm water, so to maybe even boil up a ginger tea, let it settle, and then drink it, could be really beneficial, especially in times of high kapha in the air, like wintertime, for instance, when it's cold and wet. Once I've had my warm water, then I sit down for meditation. One of the things as well that is often done, and I do it too, depending on what my physical activity will be, is to at least wash your face. As you might notice, when you wake up in the morning, you also have, some people have it more than others, but some ama or toxins in the corners of the eyes, for instance. And so just to throw some nice cold water on your face is a really good way to wake up and to clear. And so for depending on as well, if you're someone who finds it hard to be awake early in the morning, it really can be helpful. I would even go as far, this is why I was saying about depending on the physical activity that I do. If I'm going for my practice, my Ashtanga Mysore practice in the yoga shala, I will have a cold shower fully. So I will shower my whole body and wash. Of course, I've built up toxins during the night, and so there's sweat and all other kinds of whatever that needs to come out. So I need to shower, because actually when I practice, the physical practice is quite strong, so it's actually quite good to start your practice clean, okay? Because otherwise, as you may know or may not know, sweat in itself, it's not necessarily smelling badly, okay? It's the sweat that has been dried into the skin. So basically old one that's been in touch with the air, and so it might even be in connection with like bacteria and stuff. That's where we start to have a bit of a nasty smell to the sweat. And so for several reasons, but one which is just, to be polite to the people next to me when I practice, I shower in a cold, nice shower before I go practicing. And in that case, I do it even before my meditation, so that I feel really nice and awake as well for that. Then I sit down. I usually take about 20-25 minutes of meditation. And once that is done, I start to prepare for my physical activity. And so that can be going for my practice, or it can also be going for a run. Okay? So it's really important to get moving in the morning, because not only is it good it's a good way to, stay healthy, it's also part of the elimination process. You've been eliminating your toxins, but that's also what you do when you exercise. Of course, you're getting the heat up in the body, so that not only are you getting all your fluids moving and your blood moving and your muscles pumping around, no, the blood pumping, the muscles moving, but you are eliminating, which happens through the sweat. It is also the best time of the day to do this, simply due to the Ayurvedic dinacharya, which is the routine, because early in the morning is when the atmosphere is the heaviest, so it's actually the kapha time of the day, which means that is also when we can feel a little bit heavier, and that is why we need to move at that time of the day, right? So two of the principles that we need to remember when it comes to Ayurveda and to stay balanced is that likes attracts like, and opposites balance each other out. So when it's really heavy, we need to move in order to not actually just want to go back and fall back asleep and let kapha take over. Once I've finished my physical activity, I wash myself. I make sure, of course, that I rest after the physical activity, so that I let my nervous system settle again, and so that I let everything rest and come back into homeostasis and into normal, so that I'm not all agitated for the rest of the day because I didn't allow my body to recover after the physical activity. That is really essential. If you practice yoga, traditional yoga would tell you that your shavasana should be 20 minutes long. That sounds, to some people I know, really long. I know that in the Ashtanga world, they often talk about 5 minutes, and it kind of makes me laugh a little bit because the Ashtanga yoga is so physically challenging that it's strange that they're only talking about 5 minutes, especially since the traditional practice of yoga, so the Hatha yoga, that's the traditional kind, the classical, is much softer in physical intensity, yet they stay on the 20-minute resting. And I completely agree with that. I personally find that I usually need to really rest quite a long time in order to feel that I recover, especially when I've practiced Ashtanga yoga. And then I'm ready to start my day. So I've now given you my morning routine. Don't be discouraged, because now I'm going to give you the hours that I get up. And I know that for some of you, this might seem impossible to do. So you don't have to actually do exactly like I'm doing, obviously. But it can be something to aim towards, okay? You have to remember one thing, and that is that I am already an early riser. That's perfectly natural to me. It's been my whole life, which means that it has never been an effort for me to get up early in the morning. Also, I go to bed, therefore, very early, and that is something that is really beneficial for my physical well-being, for my organs to recover and to detox at the right times, and also I get enough sleep that way. And because I live in a climate where it gets hot quite early, it is essential for me to get up really early before all of that happens. So this means that I rarely wake up, or get up, I should say, after 5 a.m., often before 5 a.m. This means that I also can start my physical activity somewhere between 6 and 6:30. Let's say 6:30. The kapha time starts around 6, depending on a little bit, of course, seasons and where you are in the world. But usually it's when the sun begins to rise. So somewhere in that area of 6 a.m. And then this means that around 8:30 in the morning, I have finished my physical activities, and which means that the time to then shower and get dressed around 9 a.m., I feel super clear and sharp and ready to start my working day. 9 a.m., you are still in the kapha time of the day. The pitta time starts a little bit later. And so for me, that is also a really good time where, since I've cleared out so much, my kapha is really low, I don't feel heavy by the kapha time. And instead, I feel very clear-minded. So it's also, for me personally, the time of the day when I'm really creative, inspired, and productive. And it's also, therefore, often the time of the day that I sit down to record these podcast episodes. Now, I would love to know what you think about this routine and how your own routine goes. Please, if you listen to this on Apple, for instance, you can rate and comment, and I'd love to see the comments. Otherwise, I'd love to hear your views on this and your own personal experiences through my social media. Ideally, on Instagram is the easiest, I think, where you can just comment on the post that comes out about this episode. It is beneficial for me, and it's beneficial for other people as well, because we know that feeling part of the group is really motivating for all of us. Thank you so much for choosing to listen to this podcast and this episode. I am very grateful. If you enjoyed this and you think that other people could enjoy this, please help me to spread the word. Share this episode on any channel that you have of social media or messaging. And even more so, I would really appreciate if you know one other person who might benefit from my words today specifically. Take that 1 minute it takes to simply share this episode with one person. Remember that there's a human being on the other side of your phone, of your earpods, of this microphone. And I would love to hear your thoughts on what I've been talking about. So please leave a comment. Send me a message directly if you wish. This is Charlotte. This is me. See you next time. Namaste.